Run, Ash, just run! His small heart pounds, lost in the dark Sierra Nevada, fleeing a truth too heavy to bear. Ilara, a mother haunted by loss, and Marcus, a ranger guarding his makeshift son, chase through the night, their feud buried under fear. Her maternal instinct pulls her toward an ash tree. His ranger skills track a boy's fleeting steps. At dawn, they find Ash curled in a hollow, exhausted but alive, their embrace a fragile bridge over years of pain. Where ashes bloom weaves a tale of grief, hope, and rebirth. Will they heal or shatter again? Hey, if this grips you, hit that subscribe button and share where you're listening from, what time it is, and your wildest guess for how this story unfolds. Will secrets unravel them? Stick around to find out. You can't keep hiding, Alara, her voice whispered, sharp as a blade in the silence of her Sacramento apartment. The room was a tomb of minimalism. Bare walls, a sagging couch, a coffee mug stained with yesterday's regrets. Dust motes danced in a sliver of evening light, settling on a cardboard box in the corner. Inside, her pottery tools lay untouched, relics of a life where her hands shaped beauty from clay. Now they were as lifeless as the ashes of Inferno Creek, the fire that stole everything 8 years ago. Ilara's fingers brushed the box, trembling as they grazed a cracked bowl, its jagged edge a mirror to her heart. Leo had made it, his small hands clumsy but proud, giggling as clay smudged his cheeks. "For you, Mommy," he'd said, his voice bright as the sun before the smoke came. She squeezed her eyes shut, but the memories roared, sirens wailing, heat clawing her skin, the house collapsing into a pyre. Leo's room, with its mural of a lion cub under an ash tree, was gone. Her husband, his laughter was silenced. Her son, her light, vanished in the blaze. She sank to the floor, the bowl cradled in her lap, its fracture cutting into her palm. Blood welled, a small sting against the ache that never dulled. 8 years of running, new city, new job, new silence. Yet the past clung like soot. She'd avoided the news, the memorials, the pitying glances. But tonight the TV flickered on, unbidden, as if fate had grown impatient. "Inferno Creek Memorial this week," the anchor's voice droned. "Honoring the lives lost." Alara's thumb hovered over the remote, her instinct to silence it warring with a strange pull. She let it play. Images of blackened hills flashed, then faces, families, survivors, ghosts. A woman spoke of rebuilding, of hope rising from ash. Ilara's chest tightened. Hope? She'd buried that word with Leo. But something stirred, a spark in the dark. She stood, her legs unsteady, and crossed to the window. Sacramento's lights glittered, indifferent, but beyond them, the Sierra Nevada loomed in her mind's eye. Rugged, haunted, calling. Why now? She didn't know. Maybe it was the anniversary, or the bowl's sharp edge, or the anchor's words about ash and renewal. Maybe it was Leo whispering from somewhere she couldn't see. She moved fast, as if slowing would snuff the impulse. From a drawer, she pulled a faded photo. Leo grinning under the ash tree mural, his eyes wide with wonder. She tucked it into her pocket, a talisman against the void. Her hands shook as she packed a small duffel. Jeans, a sweater, a flashlight, nothing more. The pottery box stayed behind, its dust a promise she wasn't ready to keep. Her old pickup truck groaned as she turned the key, the engine coughing like it too had forgotten how to live. The city blurred past, streetlights fading into the highway's black ribbon. She drove east, toward the mountains, toward the scar of Inferno Creek. No plan, no map, just a pull she couldn't name. The photo in her pocket pressed against her thigh, a quiet weight. "I'm coming, Leo," she whispered, her voice cracking in the empty cab. The road climbed and the air grew sharp with pine and memory. She passed a sign for Black Ridge, the name stirring a vague recollection of news reports from that night. Rangers, rescues, ruins. Her hands tightened on the wheel. What was she doing? Chasing ghosts? Digging up pain? The truck's headlights carved through the dark, catching glimpses of trees, their branches like skeletal fingers. She thought of the ash tree in Leo's mural, its leaves a defiant green against the fire's hunger. A mile marker flashed by, counting down the distance to the mountains. Alara's breath hitched as the radio crackled, a faint song cutting through static. Her husband's old tune, the one he'd hum while painting. She slammed the off button, heart racing. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Yet the melody lingered, a ghost in her veins. She drove on, the Sierra Nevada rising like a wall of secrets. The memorial was days away, but she wasn't heading there. Not yet. She needed something. Answers, maybe, or absolution. The truck rattled over a bridge, the river below glinting like molten silver. Ilara glanced at the passenger seat, half expecting Leo's small form, his laugh. Empty. Always empty. But the photo in her pocket burned, and the mountains called. She pressed the gas, the engine's growl a faint echo of her resolve. Whatever lay ahead, pain, truth, or nothing, she'd face it. The ashes of Inferno Creek held something, and she'd find it, even if it broke her all over again. The truck's headlights flickered, then died as a summer storm roared over the Sierra Nevada, rain lashing the windshield like a warning. Ilara's hands shook, not from the cold seeping through the cracked window, but from the weight of her choice. She'd driven into the heart of the mountains, chasing a ghost, and now the road betrayed her. A sharp turn, a deer's fleeting shadow, and the world tilted. The truck skidded, tires screaming, before plunging into a shallow ditch with a sickening crunch. She sat frozen, heart hammering, the photo of Leo still pressed against her thigh. Miles away at Black Ridge Station, Marcus knelt beside Ash, their silhouettes framed by the glow of a lantern. "See the hoof print?" Marcus's voice was low, steady, pointing to the muddy ground. "Mule deer. Light step means it's young." Ash, eyes wide under a mop of dark hair, nodded, tracing the mark with a small, calloused finger. Marcus's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, a shield against the world. 8 years ago, he'd pulled Ash from the ashes of Inferno Creek, a trembling child saved by a stranger's sacrifice. He'd raised him since, teaching him the forest's secrets, guarding him like a flame in a storm. The radio crackled, shattering the quiet. "Marcus got a stranded driver on the old logging road." Clara's voice rasped, her tone sharp with concern. "Storm's bad. You're closest." Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't want interruptions. Not tonight. Not with Ash watching him like he held the stars. "Can't someone else handle it?" he muttered, but Clara's reply was firm. "No one's closer. Move." Ash looked up, curious, but Marcus waved him inside. "Stay put, kid. I'll be back." The rain stung as Marcus trudged through the mud, his ranger's coat heavy, his flashlight slicing through the downpour. He found the truck, its front crumpled against a pine, and a woman slumped in the driver's seat, pale as moonlight. "You hurt?" he called, voice rough over the storm. Ilara blinked, startled, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. No, just stuck." Her voice was brittle, like she hadn't spoken in days. Marcus's instinct was to get her out, get her gone. Strangers brought questions, and questions threatened the life he'd built. He checked the truck, axle bent, no chance of driving. "Town's 20 miles, he said, scanning her face. Something in her gaze, raw and searching, set him on edge. "Storm's blocking the road. You'll have to wait it out at the station." Ilara nodded, clutching her duffel, the photo of Leo a hidden weight. She followed him, her boots slipping in the mud, each step a battle against the urge to turn back. Black Ridge Station loomed through the rain, a squat cabin of weathered logs, its windows glowing like eyes. Inside, Ash sat cross-legged, whittling a piece of cedar, his knife flashing with practiced care. He glanced up as the door opened, his face still but curious. Ilara froze, her breath catching. The boy's eyes, dark, wide, familiar, pierced her, stirring an ache she couldn't name. Marcus caught her stare and stepped between them, protective. "Kid, this is..." He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Ilara," she said softly, her voice trembling as she forced her gaze away. "I'm Ilara." Ash nodded, silent, and returned to his whittling. Clara emerged from the back, her gray braids swinging, a mug of coffee in hand. "Well, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, eyeing Ilara with a mix of pity and suspicion. "Storm's got the road shut. You're stuck here till morning. Marcus grunted, tossing Alara a blanket. Sleep on the couch. Don't touch anything. His tone was clipped, but his eyes lingered, wary. Alara sank onto the couch, the blanket rough against her skin. The station smelled of pine and ash, a cruel echo of her past. She watched Ash, his small hands carving with a focus that tugged at her heart. Was it possible? No. She shook her head, gripping the photo in her pocket. Just a boy. Just a coincidence. Clara set a mug beside her. You running from something? She asked, her voice low but pointed. Alara flinched, the question too close to the truth. Just needed to get away, she lied, her fingers tracing the photo's edge. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't press. Outside, the storm howled, trapping them all in this fragile moment. Marcus sat by Ash, his hand ruffling the boy's hair. Bedtime, kid. Ash hesitated, glancing at Alara, then slipped into the back room. Alara's chest ached, the boy's gaze a spark in her darkness. She lay back, the ceiling beams blurring as memories of Leo flooded in. His laugh, his lion mural, the fire. Sleep wouldn't come. The station's warmth felt like a lie, and the photo in her pocket burned like a coal. Whatever she'd come to find, it was closer now, and it terrified her. The storm's fury had faded to a restless drizzle, leaving Black Ridge Station cloaked in a damp hush. Alara lay on the couch, the blanket a thin shield against the chill creeping through her bones. Sleep eluded her, chased away by the boy's eyes. Ash's eyes, hauntingly familiar, like a half-remembered dream. She clutched the photo of Leo in her pocket, its edges worn from her restless fingers. The cabin's walls seemed to close in, the scent of pine and ash stirring memories she'd fought to bury. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust outside felt like the past clawing its way back. Morning light seeped through the curtains, pale and uncertain. Alara sat up, her body aching from the lumpy couch. Across the room, Ash knelt by the fireplace, sketching in a worn notebook, his pencil moving with quiet intensity. Marcus was outside, his boots thudding faintly as he chopped wood. Clara, stirring a pot of oatmeal, glanced at Alara with a raised brow. You look like you fought the storm and lost, she said, her tone half teasing, half probing. Alara forced a smile, her voice caught in her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling of being an intruder, a ghost in this strange, warm world. Ash didn't look up, his focus unbroken. Alara's gaze drifted to him, drawn by the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the same way Leo's had. She scolded herself. Grief was playing tricks, weaving cruel mirages. Yet she couldn't look away. His small hands gripped the pencil, sketching with a precision that tugged at her heart, echoing her husband's careful strokes when he painted Leo's lion mural. She shifted closer, her breath shallow, as if moving too fast might shatter the moment. Clara set a steaming mug beside her. Kids always drawing, she said, nodding toward Ash. Got a whole world in that book. Alara nodded absently, her eyes locked on the notebook. Ash stood suddenly, tucking the pencil behind his ear, and darted outside to join Marcus, leaving the notebook open on the floor. The page stared up at her, a sketch of a lion cub romping through stylized trees, ash trees, their leaves sharp and defiant. A crude necklace hung around the cub's neck, a detail that didn't belong in her memory of Leo's mural. Her heart stuttered, the air too thick to breathe. She glanced at the door. Marcus's axe thumped steadily. Clara hummed in the kitchen. Alara's hand moved before her mind could stop it, reaching for the notebook. Her fingers trembled as she traced the drawing, the lion's playful stance a mirror to the mural she'd painted with Leo, laughing as paint smudged their hands. But the necklace, rough, almost like a rope, felt wrong, a jarring note in the symphony of her grief. Was it a coincidence? Or something more? Something impossible? Her pulse roared, drowning out the rain's soft patter. Don't touch his stuff, Marcus's voice cut through, sharp as the axe he carried. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes hard with warning. Alara flinched, snapping the notebook shut. I wasn't, she stammered, heat rising in her cheeks. Marcus strode over, snatching the book and tucking it under his arm. He's particular about it, he said, softer now. but his gaze held a wall she couldn't breach. Ash appeared behind him, silent, watching her with those too familiar eyes. "Sorry," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible. She stood, retreating to the couch, her hands shaking as she gripped the photo in her pocket. The lion, the ash trees, the necklace. It was too much, too close. Her mind screamed it was impossible, that grief was twisting her perception. Yet a spark, fragile and terrifying, flickered in her chest. What if? She pushed the thought down, but it clung like damp earth. Clara broke the tension, sliding a bowl of oatmeal across the table. "Eat! You'll need strength to get that truck fixed." Her tone was kind but firm, a reminder of Ilara's place as an outsider. Ilara nodded, forcing a spoonful past the lump in her throat. Ash sat across from her, eating quietly, his gaze flickering to her, then away. Marcus hovered nearby, his protectiveness a palpable force, like a storm waiting to break. The radio crackled, Clara answering a call about road conditions. Ilara's eyes drifted to the window, where the ash trees swayed, their leaves whispering secrets. She thought of Leo, of the fire, of the mural now reduced to cinders. The spark in her chest grew, a dangerous hope she couldn't quench. She didn't know what she'd find in these mountains, but Ash's drawing had cracked open something inside her, a door to a truth she wasn't ready to face, yet couldn't turn away from. The morning sun spilled across the porch of Black Ridge Station, painting the ash trees in hues of golden shadow. Ilara sat on the steps, the photo of Leo a quiet weight in her pocket, her mind still reeling from the lion sketch in Ash's notebook. The necklace, an odd rope-like detail, gnawed at her, a puzzle piece that didn't fit her memories. She gripped the rough wood of the step, trying to anchor herself against the tide of hope and doubt. The air carried the scent of damp earth, stirring echoes of a life lost to fire. Ash knelt a few yards away, under the largest ash tree, his small knife flashing as he carved a piece of cedar. His focus was absolute, his movements steady, like a ritual. Ilara watched, her breath catching at the way his brow furrowed, so like her husband's when he painted. She scolded herself again. Grief was a cruel artist, painting lies over truth. Yet the spark in her chest refused to die, fanned by the boy's uncanny familiarity. Marcus emerged from the shed, wiping sweat from his brow, his axe now traded for a toolbox. "Road's clear enough to tow your truck," he said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "Clara's calling the garage." Ilara nodded, her eyes still on Ash. Marcus followed her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Don't get ideas," he warned, low enough that Ash wouldn't hear. "He's not yours." The words stung, but Ilara said nothing, her fingers tracing the photo's edge through her jeans. Ash began to whistle, a soft, lilting tune that floated through the morning air. Ilara froze, her heart lurching. It was his melody, the one her husband hummed while painting Leo's mural, a fragment of their life before the flames. The notes curled around her, vivid as a memory, each one a needle in her chest. She stood, her legs unsteady, the porch creaking under her weight. The coincidence was impossible, a crack in the wall of her doubt. Ash wasn't just a boy. He couldn't be. She crossed the yard, her pulse roaring, and knelt beside him. "That song," she said, her voice trembling. "Where did you learn it?" Ash stopped carving, his dark eyes meeting hers, curious but guarded. "Dunno," he said, shrugging. "It's just in my head." His nonchalance was a blade cutting deeper. Ilara's breath hitched, the melody still echoing in her mind, a ghost of her husband's voice. Marcus dropped his toolbox with a clang, striding over. "What's going on?" he demanded, his protective wall rising. Ilara stood, her hands shaking, the photo in her pocket burning like a brand. "That tune," she said, her voice raw but steady. "My husband used to hum it, and your boy, Ash, his drawings, the lion, the ash trees, they're the same as my son's." She paused, the words heavy. "I think Ash is Leo. My Leo." The air stilled, the forest holding its breath. Marcus's face darkened, his eyes flashing with something between fury and fear. "You're out of your mind," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Ash is mine. I found him, pulled him from the fire. A woman died saving him. Don't you dare tarnish that." His words trembled, betraying a wound Alara couldn't see. She glimpsed it then, in the flicker of his eyes. A loss as deep as hers, buried under years of duty. "I'm not tarnishing anything," Alara said, her voice cracking but firm. "I lost my son in that fire. I know him. His eyes, his drawings. That song. I'm not crazy." She stepped closer, desperate to make him see. Marcus recoiled, his hand on Ash's shoulder, pulling the boy back. Ash looked between them, his knife still, his face a mask of confusion. "You need to leave," Marcus said, his tone final. "Now." Ilara's heart sank, but the spark in her chest blazed. She couldn't walk away, not with the melody ringing in her ears, not with Ash's eyes mirroring Leo's. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady despite the tears burning her eyes. "Not until I know." Clara appeared at the porch, her braids swinging, her eyes sharp. "Garage is on its way," she called, sensing the tension. "Everything okay?" Marcus didn't answer, his gaze locked on Alara, a storm brewing behind his eyes. Ash slipped his hand into Marcus's, the gesture small but heavy, a silent plea for safety. Alara's chest ached, the photo in her pocket a tether to a truth she couldn't let go. The tow truck's rumble broke the silence, a distant growl on the road. Alara's time here was running out, but the melody lingered, a thread tying her to Ash, to Leo, to a past she'd thought was Ash. She'd fight for it, no matter the cost. The tow truck's engine faded into the drizzle, leaving Alara standing outside Black Ridge Station, her duffel slung over her shoulder. Marcus's ultimatum echoed in her ears, his voice a steel door slamming shut. But the melody Ash had whistled clung to her, a lifeline she couldn't release. She glanced back at the cabin, where Ash's small figure vanished behind the door, Marcus's shadow looming protectively. The photo of Leo burned in her pocket, its edges worn from her relentless grip. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not when every fiber of her screamed that Ash was her son. She trudged toward town, the muddy roads slick beneath her boots. The Sierra Nevada loomed, their peaks shrouded in mist, as if guarding secrets. In the nearest town, a cluster of weathered buildings, Alara found a cheap motel, its neon sign flickering like her hope. The room smelled of mildew, the bed sagging under her weight as she sat, staring at the phone. She needed proof, something stronger than drawings and melodies. She needed truth. By noon, she was in the office of Mr. Thompson, a gray-haired lawyer with a skeptical squint. "You're claiming a boy who's been with his guardian for 8 years?" he said, leaning back in his creaking chair. "No birth certificate, no records, just a hunch?" Ilara's fingers tightened around Leo's photo, now pulled from her pocket, its corners curled. "It's not a hunch," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "His drawings, his eyes, the song he hums. It's my son. I need a DNA test." Thompson sighed, scribbling notes. "Courts don't move fast, Ms. Vance. You'll need more than memories to convince a judge." Days blurred into a haze of waiting. Alara paced the motel room, the walls closing in as she replayed Ash's whistle, the lion sketch, the ash trees. She called Thompson daily, her voice growing sharper with each delay. "They're processing the request," he'd say, his tone weary. "No guardian consent, so it's tricky." Alara's hope flickered, but she clung to it, staring at Leo's photo each night, whispering, "I'm fighting for you." At Black Ridge, Marcus felt the world tilt. Clara's questions, her pointed looks about Ash's past, gnawed at him. "You sure about his story, Marcus?" she'd asked over coffee, her eyes searching. He'd brushed her off, but doubt crept in, a crack in his certainty. He watched Ash carved by the fire, the boy's quiet focus a mirror to the child he'd found in the ashes, saved by a woman whose name he never knew. That woman's sacrifice was his anchor, his reason for keeping Ash close. Now Alara's words threatened to uproot it. One evening, Marcus sat Ash down, his voice low. "You ever remember anything before me?" Ash's knife paused, his dark eyes flickering. "Just fire," he said softly, "and a lady. She held me tight." Marcus's throat tightened, memories of his sister's death in a long-ago blaze surfacing. He ruffled Ash's hair. "You're safe now, kid." But his hands shook, the weight of Alara's claim pressing harder. Alara's phone rang on the 10th day. Thompson's voice clipped. Court approved the DNA test. You'll need to come in. She drove to the clinic, her heart a drumbeat, and submitted a cheek swab, her hands trembling as she pictured Ash's face. The weight stretched. Days of restless nights, of staring at Leo's photo, of whispering his name like a prayer. She avoided Black Ridge, knowing Marcus's anger, but Clara called once, her voice soft. He's struggling, Alara. Be sure of this. The envelope arrived at the motel, plain and unassuming, its weight heavier than stone. Alara sat on the bed, the paper trembling in her hands. She tore it open, her breath shallow, and read, probability of maternity, 99.99%. The words blurred as tears fell, not of joy but of a grief reborn. Ash was Leo. Her son was alive, had been alive, growing up without her, shaped by another's hands. The truth was a tidal wave, drowning her in relief and rage. She drove to Black Ridge, the envelope clutched like a weapon. Marcus was outside, splitting wood, his axe pausing as she approached. Read it, she said, thrusting the paper at him, her voice raw. He scanned the page, his face draining of color. The axe fell from his hands, clattering to the ground. No, he whispered, but the fight was gone, replaced by a hollow silence. Ash peeked from the porch, his eyes wide, sensing the world shifting. Alara's tears fell freely now, the photo of Leo a quiet victory in her pocket. He's mine, she said, her voice breaking. But I won't take him from you. Not yet. Marcus looked at her, his eyes raw with a pain she recognized. The truth bound them now, fragile and sharp, like ash waiting to bloom. The air in Black Ridge Station was thick with unspoken truths, the DNA results lying like a live wire between Alara and Marcus. Alara stood frozen, the envelope crumpled in her fist, her eyes locked on Marcus's as his silence screamed louder than words. Ash hovered on the porch, his small frame tense, his ears catching fragments of their confrontation. Mine, Leo, truth. The words were a storm in his young mind, tearing at the world he'd known. Without a sound, he bolted, his sketchbook clutched tight, vanishing into the forest's darkening embrace. Ash! Alara's cries shattered the stillness, her voice raw with panic. Marcus spun, his ranger's instincts kicking in, but his face was a mask of dread. Damn it, he muttered, grabbing a flashlight from the porch. He knows these woods, but not at night. Alara's heart lurched, her mother's intuition screaming that Ash, Leo, was running from more than their fight. She followed Marcus, her boots pounding the earth, the photo in her pocket a pulse against her thigh. The Sierra Nevada forest swallowed them, its canopy a tangle of shadows under a moonless sky. Pine needles crunched underfoot, the air sharp with sap and fear. Marcus moved like a hunter, his flashlight slicing through the dark, catching broken twigs and faint footprints. He's heading west, he said, his voice tight, betraying the terror beneath his calm. Alara's breath came in gasps, her mind flashing to Leo's mural, the ash tree where he'd always felt safe. The big ash tree, she said, her voice trembling but certain. He's there. I know it. Marcus shot her a glance, half doubt, half desperation. You don't know him, he snapped, but his steps quickened, following her lead. The forest was a labyrinth, its whispers mocking their urgency. Alara's legs burned, her lungs aching, but she pushed on, driven by a primal need to find her son. Marcus's flashlight flickered, the beam catching a glint of something, a page torn from Ash's sketchbook. Snagged on a branch, the lion cub's outline stark against the paper. They stopped, breathless, the torn page a knife in Alara's heart. He's scared, she whispered, her fingers tracing the lion's crude necklace. Marcus's jaw clenched, his eyes haunted. I lost my sister in a fire, he said, the words spilling out like blood. I couldn't save her. I won't lose him too. Alara met his gaze, seeing her grief mirrored in his. For the first time, they weren't enemies, just two people bound by love and loss. The wind howled, carrying a faint rustle, a child's sob maybe, or a trick of the night. Alara's heart led her forward, toward a clearing where the great ash tree stood, its gnarled branches clawing at the stars. Marcus followed, his flashlight sweeping the ground, his breath ragged. "Ash, please!" he called, his voice breaking. Ilara's eyes scanned the shadows, landing on a hollow at the tree's base, a dark cradle in the earth. There he was, Ash curled tight, his sketchbook open on his chest, the lion drawing glowing faintly in the pre-dawn light. His face was streaked with dirt, his eyes closed, his small body shivering. Ilara dropped to her knees, a sob tearing from her throat as she reached for him. "Leo," she whispered, the name slipping out, raw and reverent. She touched his cheek, her fingers trembling, feeling the warmth of her son, alive against all odds. Marcus knelt beside her, his flashlight falling to the ground, its beam forgotten. His hand hovered over Ash, then settled on his shoulder, gentle but firm. "Kid," he said, his voice thick, "you scared us." Ash stirred, his eyes fluttering open, meeting Ilara's, then Marcus's. Confusion clouded his gaze, but he didn't pull away. Ilara's arms encircled him, her tears falling into his hair, while Marcus's hand stayed steady, a silent vow. Dawn broke, a thin gold line spilling over the horizon, bathing the ash tree in light. The three of them sat there exhausted, entwined in a fragile embrace. Ilara felt the photo in her pocket, its weight lighter now, as if Leo's smile had found a home. Marcus's eyes met hers, no longer guarded, but raw with a shared truth. Ash's sketchbook lay open, the lion cub a beacon of their past and their promise. The forest was silent now, its secrets yielding to the morning, to the hope that something new could grow from ashes. The dawn's golden light lingered in Ilara's memory, a fragile thread tying her to the moment under the ash tree where she'd held Ash, Leo, close, with Marcus's steady hand anchoring them both. A year later, that thread had woven itself into something stronger, a tapestry of healing stitched from pain. Ilara stood in her new pottery shed, a converted barn on the edge of town, her hands kneading clay with a rhythm she'd thought lost forever. The air smelled of earth and possibility, the wheel humming as she shaped a bowl, its curves smooth and whole, a quiet rebuke to the cracked relic of her past. Sunlight streamed through the shed's open door, catching motes of dust like tiny stars. On a shelf, Leo's photo rested, no longer a wound but a beacon, his smile mirrored in the boy who now ran between two worlds. Ash darted in, his boots muddy, a grin splitting his face. "Mom, look," he said, holding up a sketch of an ash tree, its roots sprawling like veins. Ilara's heart swelled at the word mom, still new, still sacred. She wiped her hands, ruffling his hair. "It's beautiful, Ash," she said, her voice soft but steady. Outside, the Sierra Nevada stood sentinel, their peaks softened by spring's green haze. Ash's laughter echoed as he bolted toward Black Ridge Station, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. Ilara followed at a distance, her steps lighter than they'd been in years. The path to the station was familiar now, worn by countless trips to share meals, stories, and the boy who bound them. Marcus had fought her at first, his fear of losing Ash a fortress, but the forest had changed them, its shadows forcing them to see each other's scars. At the station, Marcus stacked firewood, his movements deliberate, his face less guarded than before. Clara was there, tending a small garden, her braids swinging as she planted a sapling, an ash tree, its leaves tender and defiant. "Grows fast, this one," she said, glancing at Ilara with a knowing smile. "Like you three." Ilara returned the smile, grateful for Clara's quiet wisdom, her way of seeing what others missed. "Ash says you're firing a new batch today," Marcus said, setting down an armful of logs. His voice was gruff but warm, the edge of distrust gone. Ilara nodded, leaning against the porch rail. "First big order for the market," she said. "He's helping me glaze." Marcus's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability flickering. "He's good at that," he said, pride lacing his words. "Gets it from you, I guess." The words hung between them, a bridge built from months of uneasy truce. They'd navigated court hearings, shared custody agreements, and Ash's quiet questions about his past. Ilara had told him stories of Leo, of his laughter, his lion mural, the melody his father hummed. Marcus had shared his truths, the woman who saved Ash, her sacrifice, his sister's loss, that made him cling so fiercely to the boy. Together, they'd carved out a new rhythm, one where Ash could belong to both. Ash bounded back, his energy a spark in the afternoon light. "Come to the creek," he called, tugging at Marcus's sleeve, then Alara's hand. They followed the path winding through pines to a clear stream, its water glinting like molten glass. Ash knelt by the bank, pulling a wooden carving from his pocket. A man, a woman, and a child, their hands linked under an ash tree. "It's us," he said, his voice shy but sure, his eyes bright with a trust that hadn't been there a year ago. Alara's breath caught, tears prickling as she took the carving, its edges smooth from Ash's careful hands. Marcus crouched beside him, his hand on Ash's shoulder, his gaze meeting Alara's. "Good work, kid," he said, his voice thick. A bird swooped low, landing on a sapling by the creek, its leaves trembling in the breeze. Alara traced the carving's lines, feeling the weight of their journey, from fire to forest, from ashes to roots. They sat by the stream, the three of them, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and hope. Ash's carving rested in Alara's lap, a testament to their new beginning. The ash tree sapling swayed, its roots drinking deep from soil once scorched. Alara felt Marcus's quiet presence, Ash's warmth beside her, and knew they'd found something rare, a family forged not just from blood, but from shared scars and stubborn love. The past would always linger, but here, by the creek, life was taking root. Where Ash's bloom ends with Alara, Marcus, and Ash by the creek, their carved figures a symbol of a family reborn from the ashes of Inferno Creek. Alara's journey from a grief-stricken mother to one who rediscovers hope through her son's survival is a testament to resilience. Marcus, once a guarded ranger haunted by his sister's loss, learns to share Ash, embracing a new bond forged in the forest crucible. Ash, caught between two worlds, finds his place under the ash tree's shade, his sketches and carvings bridging past and present. The story's heart lies in its quiet truth. From devastation, love and healing can take root, like saplings in scorched earth. Thank you for joining this journey through loss, hope, and rebirth. Your presence means the world to this tale of mending broken hearts. What did you feel when Alara held Ash at dawn? Did Marcus's walls crumbling resonate with you? Share your thoughts, your predictions, or where you're listening from. Day or night, city or countryside. Your voice adds to this story's life. Subscribe to keep exploring stories that stir the soul, and we'll meet again by the next creek, under the next ash tree. Until then, keep chasing the light in your ashes.